She called herself the world's first supermodel. She terrorized contestants on reality TV. She feuded with everyone from Naomi Campbell to Tyra Banks, and somehow convinced the world that cruelty was just another form of expertise. This is Janice Dickinson, the woman who didn't just break the rules of modeling, she rewrote them with a sledgehammer. A model so controversial that her own industry colleagues openly despised her, yet so undeniably talented that they couldn't ignore her. But behind the outrageous claims and explosive tantrums lies a darker truth about the fashion industry itself. Because Janice Dickinson didn't become the most hated supermodel by accident. She became exactly what the industry created her to be. Today, we're diving into the rise, reign, and reckoning of Janice Dickinson, the supermodel who turned self-destruction into an art form and made enemies faster than she made magazine covers. Janice Doreen Dickinson was born in Brooklyn in 1955, but her real birth happened much later, when she decided to become someone else entirely. Growing up in an abusive household with an alcoholic father, young Janice learned early that survival meant reinvention. "My father used to beat the hell out of me," Janice revealed in her autobiography. "So I created this fantasy world where I was beautiful, where I was powerful, where I was untouchable." That fantasy world would eventually become her reality, but not without cost. At 18, Janice moved to New York with $300 and a suitcase full of dreams. She was tall, striking, and possessed an otherworldly beauty that photographers couldn't quite categorize. But more importantly, she had something that couldn't be taught, an absolute refusal to be ignored. Janice had this quality where she could walk into a room and immediately become the center of attention, recalled photographer Francesco Scavullo. It wasn't always pleasant attention, but it was attention nonetheless. Her early career was marked by rejection and struggle. Agencies told her she was too ethnic, too tall, too intense, but Janice persisted with a determination that bordered on obsession. "I was told no so many times I lost count," she later said, "but every no just made me more determined to prove them wrong." Her breakthrough came when she caught the eye of photographer Avedon, who saw something raw and powerful in her unconventional beauty. But it was her work with Helmut Newton that would define her career and her reputation. Newton, known for his provocative, often controversial fashion photography, found in Janice a willing collaborator in pushing boundaries. Their shoots were legendary for their intensity, sexuality, and complete disregard for conventional beauty standards. "Helmut taught me that being shocking was more valuable than being pretty," Janice explained. "Pretty girls were a dime a dozen. Unforgettable girls were rare." By the late 1970s, Janice Dickinson had achieved something remarkable. She was one of the highest-paid models in the world. She graced the covers of Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Cosmopolitan. She worked with every major photographer and designer. She was, by any measure, a supermodel. But success only amplified her worst qualities. "Fame didn't change Janice," observed fashion editor Grace Mirabella. "It just gave her a bigger platform to be exactly who she'd always been," which was problematic. The problems began with her treatment of other models. Janice saw every other woman in the industry as competition to be eliminated rather than colleagues to work alongside. She would spread rumors, steal jobs, and sabotage photo shoots if she felt threatened. "Janice was like a shark," said model Cheryl Tiegs. "She could smell weakness from across a room and would attack without mercy." Her behavior on set became legendary for all the wrong reasons. She would arrive hours late, demand script changes, and throw tantrums if she didn't get her way. Photographers learned to budget extra time and money for Janice drama. "Working with Janice was like handling a live grenade," recalled photographer Arthur Elgort. "You never knew when she was going to explode, but you knew it was inevitable." But perhaps most damaging was her relationship with the truth. Janice began making increasingly outrageous claims about her career, her relationships, and her importance to the fashion industry. The most famous and disputed of these claims was that she was the world's first supermodel. "I coined the term supermodel," she declared in countless interviews. "Before me, models were just clothes hangers. I made modeling about personality, about being a star." The problem? This claim was demonstrably false. The term supermodel had been used decades before Janice's career began, and models like Twiggy and Jean Shrimpton had achieved international celebrity status years before Janice walked her first runway. Janice's relationship with reality was always flexible, said fashion historian Valerie Steele. She seemed to genuinely believe her own mythology, which made her both fascinating and insufferable. No discussion of Janice Dickinson's toxicity would be complete without examining her legendary feuds, conflicts so bitter and public that they became entertainment in their own right. Her most famous rivalry was with Naomi Campbell, a feud that began in the 1980s and continues to this day. The conflict started over a Versace campaign that Janice claimed she was promised, but that ultimately went to Naomi. "Naomi stole that job from me," Janice alleged. "She used her connections to push me out." Naomi's response was swift and brutal. Janice is a has-been who can't accept that her time is over. The feud escalated over the years, with both women making increasingly personal attacks. Janice questioned Naomi's professionalism, while Naomi dismissed Janice as irrelevant. Watching Janice and Naomi go at each other was like watching two gladiators fight to the death, observed fashion journalist Andre Leon Talley. Except gladiators had more class. But Naomi wasn't Janice's only target. She feuded with Cindy Crawford, overrated, Linda Evangelista, pretentious, and virtually every other successful model of her era. Janice couldn't stand to see other women succeed, explained model agent Eileen Ford. She took every other model's success as a personal attack on her own relevance. Perhaps most tellingly, she even feuded with models from earlier generations, dismissing icons like Twiggy and Jean Shrimpton as not real supermodels. Janice needed to tear down everyone else to build herself up, observed fashion psychologist Dr. Carolyn Mayer. It's a classic narcissistic pattern, the inability to celebrate others' success without feeling diminished. Just when it seemed Janice's career might be winding down, reality television gave her a second act and a whole new platform for her toxic behavior. In 2003, she joined the judging panel of America's Next Top Model, Tyra Banks' reality competition show. The role seemed perfect for Janice. She could share her industry expertise while mentoring the next generation of models. Instead, she turned the show into her personal torture chamber. Janice was supposed to be the industry expert, recalled a former ANTM producer who requested anonymity. But she seemed more interested in destroying these girls' confidence than building it. Her critiques were notoriously harsh, often crossing the line from constructive criticism into personal attacks. She would mock contestants' appearances, question their intelligence, and make comments that would be considered workplace harassment in any other context. "You're not a model, you're a joke," she told one contestant. "I've seen more life in a corpse." To another, "Your face is forgettable." Actually, it's worse than forgettable. It's actively unpleasant to look at. These weren't isolated incidents. Week after week, Janice delivered critiques so cruel that even her fellow judges seemed uncomfortable. Janice took criticism to a sadistic level, observed reality TV expert Dr. Mark Young. She seemed to genuinely enjoy causing pain. Her behavior wasn't limited to the contestants. She feuded openly with Tyra Banks, the show's creator and host, often undermining Tyra's authority and questioning her decisions. "Tyra's not a real supermodel," Janice said in one particularly explosive episode. "She's a commercial model who got lucky." The tension between them became so toxic that it affected the entire production. Crew members reported that the set was like a war zone when both women were present. "Working on ANTM during the Janice years was incredibly stressful," revealed a former crew member. "You never knew when she was going to explode, and when she did, everyone suffered." The breaking point came during the show's fourth cycle, when Janice's behavior became so disruptive that producers were forced to act. After a particularly explosive confrontation with Tyra, Janice was fired from the show. Janice had to go, Tyra later explained. She was creating a toxic environment that was harmful to everyone involved. But even her firing became controversial. Janice claimed she quit, Tyra said she was fired, and the truth became another casualty in their ongoing war. Being fired from ANTM should have been a wake-up call for Janice, but instead, it seemed to accelerate her descent into irrelevance and self-destruction. She launched her own modeling agency, which quickly failed amid allegations of mismanagement and unprofessional behavior. She wrote a series of tell-all books that were heavy on gossip and light on truth. She made increasingly desperate attempts to stay relevant, including plastic surgery procedures that left her looking like a caricature of her former self. Janice became addicted to attention, explained celebrity psychologist Dr. Cooper Lawrence. When she couldn't get positive attention, she settled for negative attention. Any attention was better than being ignored. Her personal life became equally chaotic. Multiple marriages ended in bitter divorces. Relationships with her children became strained. Financial problems mounted as her earning potential diminished. Janice's life became a cautionary tale about what happens when you burn every bridge. Observed fashion journalist Kathy Horan, she had alienated so many people that when she needed help, there was no one left to call. But perhaps most damaging was her continued insistence on her own importance in fashion history. As younger models achieved success and older models gracefully transitioned to new careers, Janice remained stuck in the past, endlessly relitigating her glory days. Janice couldn't let go of being the first supermodel, said fashion historian Caroline Milbank. She built her entire identity around this claim. And when people stopped believing it, she had nothing left. As the fashion industry began to reckon with its history of toxicity and abuse, Janice Dickinson's behavior came under new scrutiny. What had once been dismissed as diva behavior, or industry toughness, was now recognized as workplace harassment and emotional abuse. Janice represented everything wrong with the old fashion industry, explained model advocate Sarah Ziff. The cruelty, the competition, the complete disregard for mental health and human dignity. Young models who had been subjected to Janice's treatment began speaking out about the lasting damage it had caused. Janice told me I was ugly and would never work, revealed one former ANTM contestant. I was 18 years old, and I believed her. It took years of therapy to undo the damage she caused in just a few minutes. The industry began to distance itself from Janice and what she represented. Agencies implemented new policies to protect models from harassment. Reality shows hired psychologists to support contestants. The culture that had enabled Janice's behavior was slowly changing. Janice was a product of her time, acknowledged fashion editor Sally Singer, but that doesn't excuse the harm she caused. We had to do better. Today, Janice Dickinson remains a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ego and the toxic culture that once dominated the fashion industry. Her claim to be the world's first supermodel has been thoroughly debunked. Her behavior has been widely condemned, and her influence has largely been erased from fashion history. Janice wanted to be remembered as a pioneer, reflected fashion critic Robin Given. Instead, she'll be remembered as a cautionary tale about what happens when talent is overshadowed by toxicity. But perhaps the most damning aspect of Janice's legacy is how completely she's been forgotten by the industry she claimed to have created. While other models from her era are celebrated as icons and pioneers, Janice is rarely mentioned in fashion retrospectives or museum exhibitions. The fashion industry has a long memory for beauty and talent, observed fashion historian Hamish Bowles. But it also has a long memory for cruelty and unprofessionalism. Janice chose to be remembered for the wrong things. Her absence from fashion's official history is particularly striking given her genuine achievements. She was, by any objective measure, a successful and influential model. She worked with legendary photographers, appeared on countless magazine covers, and helped define the aesthetic of her era. Janice could have been remembered as a trailblazer, said model agent Ivan Bart. Instead, she'll be remembered as a cautionary tale. That's the tragedy of her story. She had everything and threw it all away for the sake of her ego. So was Janice Dickinson truly the most hated supermodel of all time? The evidence suggests she was certainly among the most disliked. But perhaps more importantly, she was the most self-destructive. Janice didn't just make enemies, observed fashion journalist Booth Moore. She made enemies unnecessarily. She could have been difficult and still maintained relationships. She could have been competitive without being cruel. She chose to be hated. That choice, to prioritize short-term satisfaction over long-term relationships, ultimately cost her everything. While her contemporaries have maintained their relevance and respect, Janice has become a punchline, a cautionary tale, a reminder of everything the fashion industry is trying to leave behind. Janice represents the worst impulses of the fashion industry, concluded fashion critic Vanessa Friedman. The cruelty, the narcissism, the complete disregard for others. She didn't just participate in that culture, she embodied it. In the end, Janice Dickinson's greatest achievement may be serving as a mirror for the fashion industry's own worst tendencies. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about an industry that has often prioritized image over humanity, success over kindness, and individual achievement over collective well-being. Janice was a monster, said one former colleague, but she was a monster that we created. The question isn't why she became so hated. It's why we allowed her to become that way in the first place. Perhaps that's the real lesson of Janice Dickinson's story. She wasn't just the most hated supermodel. She was the supermodel who forced an entire industry to look in the mirror and confront what it had become. And maybe, just maybe, that makes her more important than she ever claimed to be. So what do you think? Was Janice Dickinson a victim of an industry that rewarded toxic behavior? Or was she simply a cruel person who happened to be beautiful? Could her story have ended differently? Or was her downfall inevitable? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into fashion's dark side compelling, don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from the industry that shapes how we see beauty, success, and ourselves.